For perspective, I'm a female, and this story takes place in the summer of 2017. I worked in a customer service role at a financial institution. I answered phones for many years, and my position transitioned into more of an online message, email, and live chat role. While I answered messages, I sat in an open desk area next to my coworkers who did answer phones all day. Since my job didn't require much talking, I could hear a majority of their conversations. It was also a small department, and we all talked and were relatively close. All was business as usual until one day I noticed several messages submitted to us in all the different communication avenues. The message was pretty basic. It was a customer asking for help logging into their online account, but it just seemed odd. Side note, most of my career history has been in the financial institution industry. I've worked in many areas like mortgages, new accounts, and even debit card fraud. After so many years, it's ingrained in me to look for suspicious activity. I won't get into what makes something suspicious, but I will say my senses were tingling. Anyway, back to the story. Since all of the messages seemed off and the person could have just been anyone, I instructed them to try the forgot password option or call for further assistance. Not much else I could really do at that point. I continued on with my day and noticed my coworker next to me, who was also a customer service veteran, was on a call, and she was making the face we all do when there's a real wacko on the phone. I heard her say the man's name and inform him that although it was his wife's account, he wasn't technically listed as an owner and could not be helped into logging in online. It caught my attention, and after they disconnected, I told her that he must be desperate to get in because he sent several messages the night before that I answered this morning. She told me he had mentioned that him and his wife were separated, but that he was the caretaker for their children and needed money from that account so he could support them. He went into detail about how his daughter was a preteen and needed new bras and underwear, and she had developing needs. It was super uncomfortable to hear, but again, not much we could do other than chalk up his strange behavior to an overshare and him being a little off. Less than 5 minutes later, I got a live chat, and it's the odd guy again. Thinking he was going to get different people, he tried getting into the online account again, saying all the same things he said on the phone. I told him the same information and told him he'll have to be added or have his wife contact us to get assistance. Our phones and chats were programmed for efficiency, so if customers called before and the agent they had spoken with was available, they'd get them again. In case a customer didn't get the same agent, that agent is supposed to notate the account so other agents can read what's going on. Needless to say, this man kept contacting us over and over. Even though it was me and my closest desk mate getting him 90% of the time, others got him as well. He got more panicked and frustrated, causing him to get a little more strange with each call. We started watching the account because of the behavior and discovered he did eventually break in online. The man managed to send himself a check to be mailed for a few $100s, and because we were watching it, we contacted the account owner. We verified it wasn't supposed to be sent and canceled the check. We then informed her to change her password immediately. After that happened, we didn't hear from the man. We figured he knew the check had been stopped and we weren't going to help him no matter how hard he tried. A few days later, I was riding into work, mindlessly listening to the radio. On the morning radio show, they share a few short local news stories, and one in particular sent chills down my spine. I heard, "A man, Jay Horn of Henry County, shot and murdered his 2 children before turning the gun on himself." The news anchor said the man's name, and I immediately knew it was the customer we had been talking to every day for several days over the last week or two. He murdered his 2 young children and then himself the day divorce proceedings were to start. I can't help but wonder if part of it was because of him not being able to successfully send money and going crazy from his relationship ending. I immediately cried, thinking of the lives of those poor children and what they must have been thinking in their last moments. My coworkers and I all had such a creepy vibe from him, and I wish there was more we could have done in our situation as we noticed his odd behavior escalating. because maybe we could have saved those poor babies. I'm an 18-year-old female living in a small town in Michigan. When this incident took place, I had been working a few hours a week in a small pizzeria. It was in my town, and I had been working there about a year when my boss decided to go on vacation. She and her family lived in an apartment below the restaurant, and 2 other apartments were overhead. In order to get into these apartments, you had to go to the back of the building and down a sketchy set of stairs, or the grass slope where you would find her door and the stairs leading up to the apartments above. Beyond that, there's a yard and then some woods. I think it's important to mention that there was absolutely no reason to be behind the restaurant unless you were trying to enter these apartments. Now, I usually worked with my mom because we got stuff done easily, and I hate answering phones. One night my mom was feeling ill, so I had to work with another lady. She's very sweet but not super efficient, so I was working hard to keep up and getting a bit agitated when she told me that we needed Parmesan. I agreed to go get it from the store just down the road if she promised to not make me answer phones for the rest of our shift. There was only about 2 hours left, which normally were pretty slow, so I guess it didn't matter that much anyway. As I was getting in my SUV, I saw a guy pull in the small parking lot with a beat-up car and park near the back. He was lanky and wearing oil-stained shop clothes, which was and still is totally normal around here. He got out and retrieved a bag from his trunk and headed down the slope. I know this guy wasn't a renter because I'd never seen him before, and the renters frequently order pizza. It was possible he was a friend of one of the renters, but that didn't seem right. It was 9:30 at night, and one renter was a single mom, and the others were 2 brothers with mental health issues that were pretty antisocial. I was getting bad vibes, so I grabbed my knife from the center console and tucked it up my sleeve. Call me paranoid, but there had been a lot of car fires and break-ins during that time, so I was nervous to go anywhere unarmed. It might have been a stupid thing to do, but I considered my boss a friend, and I didn't want this guy to hurt any of the renters or steal from any of the apartments. I decided to go see what he was doing, just in case he had any ill intentions. I got out of my car and walked quietly to the slope. There was motion-activated lights, so I could easily see what he was doing. He was fiddling with an old key ring and trying to get into my boss's apartment. "What are you doing?" I asked loudly, so that my coworker could hopefully hear me through the open back door. He was startled, but smiled, and told me he worked for my boss's husband, and he was there to feed the dog and let it out. His smile was creepy, the kind that a liar gives when they're trying really hard to convince you. My boss did have a dog, and her husband did own a fabrication shop, so his story seemed to check out, but I was still not convinced. I decided to go get the cheese and check again when I got back. "Okay, let me know if you need help with anything." I tried to sound as normal as possible, but I was seriously creeped out. I hustled at the store and then back to work. I'd been gone only about 15 minutes when I got back, and surprisingly, he'd already gone. I was still feeling suspicious and bad for the dog who'd been shut in a good portion of the day, so I decided to text my boss when I got out of work. Fast forward 2 hours and I was on my way home. I got to my door and I decided to check Facebook. As I was scrolling, I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a picture of my boss with her dog on the beach from earlier that day. I called my boss and then the police to make a report. It turned out the guy had been fired by my boss's husband earlier that week for making an inappropriate comment about his 19-year-old daughter and repeatedly harassing other female staff. This guy had planned some sort of revenge scheme but didn't know they had left for vacation. His bag was full of tools and a couple of knives. During questioning, he told them that the only reason he left was because he thought I was watching him. Thankfully, he went to jail for that and a couple other things he had been wanted for previously. This still creeps me out to this day, and I hate to think what would have happened if they had been home.